This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You are listening to it, and I hope you're doing well. I hope everybody out there had a good week. There is no denying it. We are in 2019. You can't hide from it anymore. So what are you doing? How are you starting it off? Whether that's a new project or a vacation or, just waiting for your paycheck because you work for the government and the government's not working so well right now. Whatever it is, I am back to distract you just like I do every Tuesday. And this episode, this week, man, a legend of electronic music. The Crystal Method is on the show. Originally a duo, now just a solo act. Scott and I sat down at his studio, the studio where they've made a lot of the Crystal Method music that you know and love, out in LA. And man, it was a real treat to get to talk to him. The Crystal Method have a new album out right now called The Trip Home. It's the first album as a solo act, and it's just a really cool reinvention of the whole project, I think. It's got something for everybody. There's a lot of that classic Crystal Method sound that if you've been a fan for a long time, you'll definitely connect with it. But it's updated and it's new and it's kind of flipped on its head. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Go check it out. It's well worth your time. In the conversation you're about to hear, we're also talking about some upcoming remixes that are going to come out for that album and a bunch of new projects that he's working on. It sounds like a live tour is going to be in the works. You definitely need to keep it locked. And as always, the links to where you can follow the Crystal Method, keep up to date with tour dates, new music, everything is going to be in the description of this episode. I'll tell you a little more about it in a second. Before I do, I need to make sure that everybody out there is subscribed to this show. Right now, just go ahead, if you haven't already, and click the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to listen. If you're on SoundCloud, hit the follow. I know I say it a lot, but you'd be surprised how many people will come up and tell me, oh, I didn't know you had XYZ on the show. How did I miss that episode? The only way you can be sure you're not going to miss one, subscribe to it, man. That way, every single week, each new episode is just going to get delivered straight to you. I'll just show up every week at your door for free with a brand new episode for you. And speaking of, man, we're getting into, this is almost episode 90, I think, if it's not already. There's a lot of good episodes out there that have already aired over the last year and a half. If you're a new listener, if you came in only halfway through, I highly recommend going back through, go through some of the old episodes, scroll back in the feed. I guarantee that I've talked to some artists that you know and love. Right now, I'm thinking about a couple different episodes. One I recorded with 12th Planet. Man, that was like a roller coaster ride. That dude is a force of nature, a legend in the dubstep game. The things he's seen, the stories in that episode, definitely go check that one out. That's episode number 33. And 10 after that, episode 43, I recorded with Nightmare. That was great too, man. It was so good to connect with him. He's a guy I don't get to see much. We had a lot to talk about. He's had such a big success in the last couple of years. And I felt like in that conversation, he got to really stretch out and speak his mind. And I felt like maybe he just didn't get a lot of opportunities to do that recently. We got kind of deep. It was a good one, man. So go check both of those out. A bunch of other great episodes back in the feed. And once you're done with that, you can also go check out the Back to Bangers Spotify playlist. If you're on Spotify, I do a playlist every single week as kind of a companion piece to this show. I update it with new music from my guests, from myself. I try to throw in some music that we mention on the show, stuff that comes up in conversation, and just other related songs, other new music I think you might dig. It's eclectic, it's fun, I have a good time putting it together. The link to that is in the description of this episode as well. And as always, you can reach out to me at any time you want. My email address is backtobackpod@gmail.com, or I'm on social media at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod. One of the real treats that I wasn't expecting when I started doing this has been connecting with everybody out there. It really does feel like a community. People are sometimes surprised that I respond at all. Man, I try to respond to everything. It's great to talk to you guys. So hit me up. Let's connect. Let's chat. And let's get into today's episode. So like I said, I met up at the Crystal Method studio out in LA. Our managers are actually friends, and they're the ones who kind of linked us up. So I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know what to expect. But man, Scott was just the coolest dude. So much history there. It was hard to even know where to start. And he was fun to talk to, man. I mean, you'll hear it in the conversation. He brings up his ADD a bunch of times. His mind was just racing, a bunch of crazy tangents, stories, unexpected things. You know, obviously we talked about what it's like to be in a duo for so long, a successful, legendary group that then goes to a solo act, what that transition has been like. We talked about some of the crazy history, the wild tours they've done. You know, they toured with Tool, the band Tool. They did the Family Values tour with Limp Bizkit. God, there's a great story about beefing with Fred Durst in there. We talk about their epic live show and how they've always been kind of pioneers of the live show, actually live, not just DJing, which he does as well, but the actual live show. You know, they built instruments for it. It's crazy. The new album is called The Trip Home. It's really good. I highly recommend you go check that out. And keep an eye on the Crystal Method, man. Scott's going to be out there touring more live shows, more music this year. You're going to hear all about it right now. I'm going to stop talking. I want to get into this. So check it out. This is me and the Crystal Method back to back. Let's go. It's really cool to hear that you and Ken, when he was in the group, have been in this space for so long. Just hearing that, you know, you've been here for over 10 years and kind of looking around, I don't know, I can feel the history a little bit. I mean,
well, I do tend to kind of keep things within reach. I do still have another room over there that my mate Glenn Nichols camps out in when he comes over, and we work together. A nice little spot where he can grab whatever toy off the shelf and go in there and have some fun with it. It's of course it's, you know, a dream come true to be able to have your own space. I mean, back in the day when Ken and I first put together Vegas, we were in a small 2-car garage in La Crescenta.
The studio was in the garage?
The studio was in the garage. It was, we called it the bomb shelter because there was an actual 60s era bomb shelter, one of those dig a hole, drop a prefab. Like basically just dig a hole and the truck just brings a cement ball, and they, you know, the landlady, she showed us a picture of the ad, and you know, at the time we were like, wow, that's cool, you know, go down there. But that was not, a friend did go down there, and he did say it was, as expected, probably like some scene from Indiana Jones where there's just spider webs everywhere.
Of course.
And there was a family radiation detection kit. Very cool. It had this dosimeter on there that there was few effects, you know, measuring it out to where at the end of it was, you know, few survivors. So,
man.
Yes, you're looking in a little, it looks like we're going to be all right.
Yeah.
We just can't go out. I'm sure that chicken wire filtration on the intake is going to be just fine. We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
I'm sure they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. Just the paranoia, fear.
Oh, man.
I mean,
yeah, that's the thing. You know, if there was an apocalypse, that sounds like a great place to be. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't want to go down there.
Yeah, it just seems let's but it was a fun place. Again, it was like a little, you know, everyday USA kind of neighborhood. We would only, back before we got air conditioning, we would in the room. We would work at night primarily, and so we'd be working at night. The 210 freeway was basically right in our backyard. So
this is in L.A.
This was in in the foothills, and we did three albums there. Four albums there.
So were you guys living together as well as sharing that studio space at that time?
Yes. When I moved out from out from Las Vegas, we found a place. The first place we rented was Melrose and La Brea, and when it burned through your nest egg, you'd drop $1,800 a month in 1990 on a. It was cool because the owner was a producer, and so he had had the mirror, the glass thing, and he had some soundproofing and lots of power, and so it was kind of a dream spot. But but of course we ran out of money producing. Initially we wanted to. We liked the idea of producing and remixing, and we were fans of course, all the the big new wave electronic artists, like New Order and Depeche Mode, and all those. But
and did you guys move out? You're from Vegas,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, did you guys move out to LA specifically to pursue music? Was that at that point? Did you know that was your career or what you wanted your career to be?
Yeah, Ken got a job with a producer by the name of Tony Berg. He had an opening for a second engineer, and his wife's sister was friends with Ken, and so she recommended Ken, and Tony hired Ken. So Ken moved out. He was working at being an engineer, and then eventually, he had an ear for music and producing and engineering. So he cut his teeth with Tony and went from second engineer to first engineer, and worked with a lot of really cool bands. I moved out eventually about, I guess it was a little over a year afterward, but I would come out in various weekends and it would go to raves. It was like that was like the 80, it was like 89, 90, 91. So,
and that was, there was like a small boom in that scene around that time, right?
Especially it was really underground. It was like, that was quintessential map location, warehouse, where the hell are we going? This corner, am I going to, where are we going to get jumped?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you'd round a corner and, you'd have a friendly face waiting to welcome you into a room that was, full of good vibes. But it was really about this idea of breaking away from the jocular, beer swigging, angry, it was just new and it was exciting, and it tapped into our enthusiasm for electronic music because we had already had this sort of all this gear, and we were kind of, we loved house music, the Chicago stuff, and some, Detroit stuff, and people like, Bomb the Bass, Tim Simonon, the producers from Minneapolis, the two guys that did Janet Jackson and some Prince stuff. I don't know why.
Jimmy Jam
and Terry Lewis. Yeah.
Yep.
And, Willy Morbit, people that were making interesting music with electronics and doing it in a way that, that made us feel like, hey, we have this gear. We're not having much fun working with rappers who can't rap and singers who can't sing. Let's jettison this idea of producing for someone else and really go in there and experiment and make music.
Did you have any kind of template or anyone to look to as far as I'd like to be like X or Y, because I think, in today's climate, for example, a kid who's just starting off could kind of just pull up Instagram and look at their favorite DJ and say like, oh, well, they did this and then this, and if I can do this, and there's sort of like a roadmap to follow. And I'm kind of curious because back in those days, like you said, everything was so underground. And I think even the idea that it could be a career? It was maybe sort of a foreign concept?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I saw. Well, I had a sequencer. I picked up one of the Elise's MMT8s. I had a 4-track. I had a couple of synthesizers, a guitar, because I took guitar lessons when I was a kid. So with a little PV Rat amp just to get some sounds out of it. And but when I saw Ken's setup, I had the EMU stuff, and he had the Ensoniq stuff, and so. But I saw what is it? Is it a computer? That's like a software that you put in. This will trigger notes on this keyboard. That's because I had, I'd messed around with the 4-track because I had done some stuff where I'd be like about 2 bars away from being done, and I'd slip up, and I'd like, God damn it, go back in and just play the thing over again. So I guess in a way that obviously that helped sort of my understanding of that process. Again, I've had people who have come in here and have been enamored with the software versions of the stuff that's in here, but they've been, it's like, oh, well, they know all the tricks to get the software to speak, but to get up and sit with a synthesizer and then
actually work the patch bay
and understand the way that these all analog synths are quirky in some way, that maybe there's something that's voices out or whatever it is, and you kind of just work with that. It's like for me it was a lot of fun because I kind of felt that there was it helped with it worked with my ADD and the sort of like just get on it and just start to turn stuff and make noise. And
right.
I remember many times because Ken was and he went to a proper sort of learning institution to teach him the ins and outs of EQ and compression and all these different things, and I would just plug stuff in, and Ken would come in and go, what you can't you can't do what are you doing? You can't, I'm like, well, sounds good, right?
Right.
Like
but I think that's in the grand tradition of electronic music. I think is so many what we now call innovations were kind of mistakes or doing it the wrong way at the start, right?
Yeah.
That's something I've always loved about this whole culture. And I relate to you because I'm very much the same way as far as just sort of, well, it sounds good. I don't know if I'm doing it right. But it's interesting, too, to think about working with, and for the listeners, we're sitting in a studio surrounded by a lot of pretty awesome analog gear, to think about the idea of, just having the one synth, and that's what you have, and that's your sandbox. Sometimes I think, putting a sandbox on creativity or putting limitations can really help spark those ideas, as opposed to now when we have every soft synth imaginable. You can go on YouTube, learn how to make any sound you could possibly conceive of. Do you think, your early songwriting process or even your songwriting process now is sort of shaped by those early technological limitations? Yeah,
there was, back in the day without all the luxury of endless recording, we had a DAT machine and we would, send a beat to the left side and one of us would just jam on a synthesizer for 10, 15, whatever it was. And then, again, due to the limitations with the sampler's memory, what I would do is I would just cue up the DAT and then I would just sample as much as I could, and then I would cut into it. And because of the convenience of having the MIDI and a MIDI controller or keyboard or whatever directly hooked up to the sampler, you could just, there was no delay. There's no dealing with that the stuff that we all deal with now, and when it comes to recording, because it was just direct right into the box, and then I could by listening to the track I could cut into it and then find different things within the performances. But oh wow, when I drop this on the off, and I get over here, and then of course the Emax 2, which was the filters and just within the box was enough to take an SH-101, a Roland synthesizer, and make you could have the bass. You could thin it out, and you can have the mids, and you could sweep it across, and you can have some of the brights in there, and it all come from one 15-minute jam session.
Yeah.
Some tracks like Vapor Trail was and the Vapor Trail and Coming Back were a lot of those parts. I just actually went through some of the old DATs, and I was like, wow. That is gnarly. What is that? Like it's just raw SH-101 through a pedal and just captured and again it's hard to beat those synths of that time. Especially the my favorites, the Jupiter 6 was the Juno 106.
And I think you're seeing a lot now too with even the young producers of today. I'm seeing a lot of people sort of going back to the analog side of things. A bunch of friends of mine are buying modular gear now, and all of that, which is fascinating to me too, because in this world where everything is available, it's like I think at a certain point you almost want those limitations. You want something you can actually touch, not only just to sort of switch up the creative vibe, but I think sort of ironically, I don't know if you would agree, but there's been this thing in electronic music where a lot of it is starting to sound the same because everyone was using the same tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That was we came up, we were electronic before the EDM sort of
long before, yeah.
But I remember at some point I was like, what am I doing messing around with some of these? Not that there's a lot of really great soft synths.
And full disclosure, I'm mostly a soft synth guy. I'm mostly in the box. That's most of what I do, but it's, I am always just in awe when I see other people who have gone so far down the analog route and the amazing things they can do with it, that even with, like I keep saying, everything available to me in software, I'm still just like, how the fuck did they make that?
Yeah. And so that was, one of the things that I wanted to get back to. So Holy Arp from the album, The Trip Home, was kind of, born out of this, I'm just going to vamp out on this, ARP 2600 and its companion sequencer and, just make noises, get in there and, get content, if you will, and then just start cutting into it. But again, now using technology and DAWs that are pretty good with all that time stretching, I was able to really kind of finesse the what I recorded, and then I just remember I had this demo, and I was like, man, this is could be the next the Crystal Method, because I'm always it's whether we succeed or fail, we've always made an effort not to repeat ourselves.
Right.
Like when we Vegas, after touring on Vegas for 2 or 3 years and going back in the studio in late '99,
and that was it. So, maybe not the peak, but that was, sort of the first major Crystal Method explosion, right? With the Vegas album and people's reaction to that.
Yeah, and it was, and it just kept, people loved that record, and I loved the record, but I just knew that there was no way we were going to be able to be successful going in and making another Vegas album.
Right.
Although...
Did you feel pressure to do that from any corner? Because, to place it in context, there was a whole scene of this, quote unquote, big beat sound or breakbeat sound that was kind of blowing up globally. And, for lack of a better term, like all eyes were on you and your peers who were kind of in that scene at the time. Was it sort of intimidating, after that first album to go into the second one with, all this new attention and new pressure and new expectations from people on you?
It wasn't really because we didn't have the typical A&R guy who's coming over and telling us, hey, we had a great A&R person by the name of John Seidel who just the coolest guy in the world, and come over and suggest, hey, why don't you here's a guy maybe that will work out, maybe it won't. That sounds cool. I love that. But there was never any kind of pressure from the label that we were on at the time. Outpost, which then dissolved into Geffen, which then dissolved into the whole Universal.
Right.
Yeah. So
another one of them. Yeah.
So, but not really. And the main thing I just knew that that wasn't going to be anything that I wanted to do. So I stopped leaving. Not that I could get away from it for long, because of course we were touring a lot, but I wasn't listening to a lot of electronic music. I really got into digging into, sort of the crate digger mentality and finding, gems in the old funk and, rare beats and things.
Sure.
There's a shop in, at the time, and it's still there, I believe. It's called the Dusty Grooves, and it's
in Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Chicago is kind of where I came up and built my whole career. I've been in that store a million times.
Yeah. And it's I've come across some of those invoices. Like, damn it! If I just would have bought Apple stock with that, god dang, what the hell was I buying? Double set freaking blues. I was enjoying them.
Well, and it's a shared experience. I think of people of a certain age or a certain era who are doing this as a career. We all share. I mean, we all made those questionable purchases and spend money we could have spent on probably better things.
Yes.
But like, I even think about, I had Diplo on the show, and he, for years before he was successful in any way, he was basically paying his rent by just digging old records and flipping them online, and
hustling.
Yeah,
it's like the the weed dealer that buys enough to keep his own stash, and then
That's right.
So I knew that we weren't gonna. That wasn't going to be our path for a Tweekend. And of course, as we started moving into 99 and then 2000, the whole first, the next big thing for electronic music of the time, electronica, was sort of being pushed aside by the next big thing, which was this rap rock combo. So you had Rage, who was the best, and then you had all these other bands that kind of were
all the new metal guys.
The Biscuits and the and the
Limp
Corns,
Bizkit, all that.
kind of really giving alternative radio what they need to keep their listeners. So there's the next sort of hybrid of of music. So we just we worked with Tom Morello and on that record, and Scott Weiland, and a couple other people, John Bryan, and
were you in the studio with Scott Weiland? Just out of curiosity?
No. He was. We sent him stems, and he didn't even run anything by us. I've come to find out that he was notorious for being sort of off on his own when it came to recording his vocals. He had his engineer, and that was his thing, even with the pilots.
Right.
So we got this track in. It was like, it's hot. It's all doing falsetto. It's like, who is it? Wait, does he do falsetto? There's a killer on the street. This whole slight bit of connection to the opiate, the destruction of of heroin. I think
right.
was sort of was in there, baked in there. But
I mean, he could do anything, man. It's crazy to think about a time when, A, when he was still in this world, but B, when he was still just showing people what he could do, Yeah,
I think, you had, well, obviously losing Scott and from Soundgarden.
Oh, Chris Cornell.
Cornell. But just briefly going back to what we were talking about
right.
with this, with sort of the discovering of records in in the in different places like Amoeba or Dusty Grooves. Especially you find these records that were made 15, 20, 30 years ago, probably sold a handful of copies. It's the only reason why you're finding this reissue is because somebody went in and bought the bulk catalog and is putting it out, and that artist isn't getting paid at all. But I just would I find myself listening to something like, damn, this is so badass, and this is like a moment in time. This really talented artist, singer, musician was thrown down, and there just wasn't an audience, or wasn't. Whatever happened in that window when the opportunity was there. It's a fleeting thing to be able to, first of all, make music for a living. We've not only know more than we that we could possibly name in this one sitting, people that have put records out, have been in the business. I mean, I know countless people that are a hell of a lot more talented than I am, but just, but there's a combination of so many different things that go into that. And
of course. I mean, it's one of the great, tragedies of this business that I think is just baked into the business is that, some people just don't catch the right break or aren't doing it at the right time or in front of the right people. And like you just said, I mean, there's a large number of talented people who kind of just don't hit it at the right time,
And there's a lot of, there are a lot of things that go into it, being at the right place, the right time, and then having momentum and
being ready for it, right?
And when if we put that little two-car garage, turn that little two-car garage into a studio, we did the first track, Now's the Time, did the remix for that, and it came out 3,000 copies of vinyl. We're so like, wow, that's cool. 3,000 people bought our record. Most of them were sold other places, I think overseas, but wow, it was like 3,000, that's so cool. And then then it was like, oh, I got to do another one, right?
Yeah,
right. So when the second one was Keep Hope Alive, and then we started getting the offers to play, and that was something that that was.
Had you DJ'd before or performed before, before you started putting out records as the Crystal Method?
Well, Ken was he was a program director and music director station director at a college radio station in Las Vegas called KUNV. They were right in that 80s, K-rock era where, everything from, the Depeche Mode and, mod sort of stuff, Talking Heads and, and all that, modern English and all that, was swirled into the Cult and and the Cure and Depeche Mode and all that, and then you had Jane's Addiction, and but then you also had the fun stuff. You had some hip hop crossovers, and so he was playing. He was doing a DJ night called New Music Night at a little sports bar right across from the street from the university, and he did it every Thursday, and. I was underage. He just carry my records in. So I went in
nice.
and I was at first I was like, wow, there's not it was fun, not really a lot of people there. He kind of had a really big night, and then of course there was another place down the street that became popular. But we just hang out, and he would just play music and drink and for free, and because we were I became his next in line, I guess. And
Sure.
When he left and moved to California, even though I didn't really even have an ID, that said I was even old enough to be in there, I took over the night and built it up. And so I was DJing in that way. It was really kind of vinyl mixing and, that whole world. I did it for as long as I could. I did it the best I could. But it was really, really about just playing whatever music I wanted to play. If I wanted to play, Kool Moe Dee into KLF or into
Right.
If I wanted to play whatever I wanted, it was there for me. So I had a great deal of fun with that. But when we started the band, it was all about the live show. There wasn't
the
really
live
even
show right off the bat.
Yeah,
right?
there wasn't really even a market for artists like us to DJ. We weren't that clued into the scene, so we were just kind of all about playing live. So we would take whatever we could. I think it was a sampler, some sort of keyboard, and whatever we could to get on the plane. tip the guy at the counter at the curb to check all that stuff in, and hope to God it showed up in one piece, and we'd take everything, fit it all into the back of the promoter's Celica or whatever, and go and set up and go on at 2 a.m. and finish, and go back out and clean all the stuff off the stage and put it all back in that Celica.
All yourself, no crew.
Yeah, no,
like
it was just
that,
Ken. It was just Ken and I for the from 95, 96, and then going into 97 when things started to pick up. We did a tour called the Electric Highway Tour, which was sort of the first ever traveling electronic festival. It had us and Fluke, and but we only did live stuff for until 2003 or 2 when we put out our first sort of mixed compilation called Community Service, and then
Right.
we were open to DJing, but it was about at least 5-6 years, maybe even longer, where we didn't do any sort of DJing. We wanted to make sure everybody knew that we were, a live act.
Sure.
We'd go into hard ticket sell, places and.
And your quote unquote competition at the time was all bands, right? And I feel it's sort of weird because now, again, in 2018, it's almost been flipped on its head. But back in those days, I'd have to imagine doing it live would almost make more sense to a crowd than DJing, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially, in our situation, because it was. We didn't have that many records on our own records
Right.
on
course,
vinyl.
Yeah.
That's the we
No MP3s,
we had these 2 here. Yeah, that was just our we both grew up going to concerts, loving the experience.
And I feel like there's always been a rock edge to what you do,
absolutely,
or a rock attitude kind of baked into it.
Yeah, because I grew up, I was a metalhead. I mean, I grew up, wanting to,
Same.
play drums and twirl sticks, and it was a very powerful, awe-inspiring opportunity to watch when someone perform a song. Going and seeing like AC/DC or Judas Priest or Iron Maiden or Crew or whoever show up, and then what the great thing about those bands is that they gave it large when they were on stage. You never felt that you were being gypped by the performer, because they were, just as excited about it. Most of them were anyway. So, getting into touring, our thing was always just, set up our gear the front of the stage and let people, be, like they're just like you would at a normal club show.
Right.
And
bring that vibe to a larger stage.
Yeah, just so of course as we went out and the alternative radio was playing, a little bit more diverse selection around, that 97, 98, 99, so we had a lot of radio play with Busy Child, and then again with Name of the Game as we went into the Tweekend album cycle, and we would do radio shows, we'd summer radio shows, winter holiday shows where we would play after bands like Offspring or Green Day. I mean, we were doing we did a show in '98 at the RFK Stadium where because at that time nobody wanted the last spot of the night. For whatever reason, it was better to have the spot before the last spot. So and so our manager Richard Bishop, who was very clever, he went in and said, "Oh, well, Crystal Method would take that spot," and it'll be like a party. We'll bring a bunch of lights, and if people leave, which of course that was why people didn't want that spot, then so be it. We would just we'd go up there and hold our own as much as we could with a band who just brought a teenager fan from the audience who had them singing along with them, and then the entire crowd is singing, and then they light their gear on fire and they walk off stage. It's a
different vibe.
But again, but it is attitude. It really is always it's attitude, and it's for me even today. I get this adrenaline drop, whether it's 50 to 500 to 5,000. That flight or fight thing that happens. And now that Ken left, we would DJ back and forth. So he'd play 2, I'd play 2, we play 3, back and forth. And at a 2-hour set, you play 1 hour each.
Right.
I don't know what the hell I did for that other hour. I think I drank and I just wandered around and jumped up on stage and I was, thinking about the next song. But it's now where I get to go up and just have my own narrative. It's such an interesting thing because for the first couple shows, I was like, wait, okay, I got to play a little longer, but now I can actually expand my own understanding of where I want to go because we didn't make demands on each other. You're going to play this, or we suggest, hey, this might go over here, or whatever. So I have a great deal of fun letting my ADD ride. At 3 or 4 decks. Only music that I love, that I want to hear. I'm no longer beholden to this. Oh, well, you play in this club where this bottle service, they're going to be, they're going to,
Yeah. I think you've earned the right to not worry about that.
Yes. I find that there are a lot of people out there that came up in the same scene as I did that sort of left out of what is traditionally a recycling of genres, classic rock, 50s, 60s, FM radio, continue to find some format, and there's classic rock, and then you were the 80s, now 80s, there's the 80s channels, and 90s, there's plenty of 90s channels, and then, you still with all the Siriuses and all the others.
You're right that there isn't really so much of an outlet for the 90s, the early-ish electronic scene
the Massive Attacks, the Portisheads, the Chemical Brothers, Daft Punk, the Propeller Heads, and, I'm sure there's some podcasts or some other sort of mix shows that are out there that do that, and in a way, again, being not that there aren't plenty of artists, Josh Winks and Moby and Felix the House Cat and all these guys that have been in the scene as long as I have and continue to tour. But as far as just if you look at the block of artists that we were sort of in the same category as us, that sort of electronica, there's a lot of people who cut their teeth and went out and had their moment with their friends, and I experience that all the time where I get people to come out, oh my God, I get my friends in town and we're going to go out to the show. It's like I called everybody up, get a babysitter. We're going to out. We're doing this tonight. I love playing something and hearing somebody go, fuck yeah, oh, yeah, cool.
But I think music is so, it's almost just like another sense, the way you can smell a scent and immediately be transported to when you were a kid again. It's the same way with music, and I think it's really cool that you're able to sort of, present not only what you've done, but what you're still doing in that light and kind of, say it's cool to take a moment and appreciate it and be with people who have appreciated it in the past.
And I still play, there's still plenty of tracks that are modern tracks and new tracks that I'm like, yeah, this one's going to fit in my set.
Right.
But I have the great luxury of having, all of this history, of course, not only a catalog that spans, 20 plus years, and, definitely a lot of people out there who have found a great deal of joy in our early albums and even, our most recent albums. But there's this, again, there's just, when you get again, it just feels right when you're in a room like I was, like I've been fortunate to be the last 18 months where I get to go and play in great venues. And
I mean, that's awesome that you can still, just appreciate those little things at this point after all these years of touring, I mean, I guess that's an interesting question is, was there ever a point where you got burnt out on it or got jaded about it? Or have you always sort of just been able to, be in the moment and be like, it's really cool that I'm getting to do all of this? Because in a career that long, I think we all go through periods of sort of falling in and out of, the lifestyle and the music and all of that.
I mean, yeah, I think, I'm sure there's been, I'm not the most rested person sitting in front of you right now, but just because of my I was where was I? I was in Vegas on Wednesday for a radio show, Sacramento on Thursday, Cincinnati on Friday, and Nashville on Saturday, and back.
Yep.
Next week, coming week, I'm in Toronto and Louisville, and then I've got some time off. But I guess I think the weed has really has really helped me as far as
Sure.
as far as really take a look inside and become very conscious of the fact that I'm a fortunate person. I kind of always love going back and tapping into that kid that would look at those Circus or Kerrang magazines and see someone giving it large, playing their music, but going out and doing shows. It's such a unique experience to, I'm like sometimes, the track Ghost in the City is sort of poignant because, sometimes I'll just show up and I just tour manage myself. I get myself to the airport, somebody pick me up. I'll, walk around town, find a place in town that's got some food that I can't get anywhere else, or enjoy myself, go down to the venues. And again, I know that there are plenty of DJs and artists that are like-minded like me who care that treat people kindly. But then there's also, there's some privileged performers and artists that have come up in the era of the the big boom of EDM and they're the
expectations are high,
and they're and it just becomes again I get a great kick out of. Oh, you're okay, cool. Yeah, I saw you, and cool. And I just hang out, and the last year, 2017, when I really, again, got out there and did this sort of plan, having Runner or somebody from the, hey man, thanks for being fucking cool and not, just hanging out. And I think it fits my personality. I'm I could be grinding it back in the hotel room and, getting my, mix things together and, working. I'm not very good at working on the road. It's not I've grown up in this system where I have this
gear.
great, I need the room. I need the, headphones are not my jam when it comes to making music.
Right.
So I've had this opportunity to continue the band as the Crystal Method without the sort of the animosity that one could go through with a breakup of some sort.
Sure.
Ken happily retired. He's down there in Costa Rica, growing. I don't know, was it mangoes? I can't remember.
Sounds amazing.
Doing. It's the great thing about the way relationships come together. Him and his wife Janine, are have come to fuse together in this like-minded small footprint,
Right.
carbon footprint. Keep everything simple, smaller. I mean, this was the guy that lived in the, the Encino Pebble Tech, pool with the Range Rover and the two muscle cars and the and that. But I mean,
man, people
absolutely.
evolve. Yeah.
So I get again, I have this great opportunity to have my partner happy, to have him bless this, my moving forward without any animosity, without any, darkness or distance and all that stuff. So
Was there ever a question for you of not doing it solo? Or when he told you, whatever that conversation was that he wanted to retire, did you kind of instantly think, well, I need to keep this going?
I wasn't sure. Actually, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep the Crystal Method going. I went out and did a couple shows, and I got a great booking agent, Pete, who came in and said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I go, I just want to go play what the fuck I want to play, and I want to go and and I want to go into venues where we'll just keep it simple. We don't have to have a big
Production rig.
Yeah, we don't. We need to. I'll go in and we'll see how it goes. And the feedback was positive. And 2000. And then I did the tour with Tool in 2017.
Yeah, we should talk about that for a second. Because a tour with Tool, how did that even come about?
That came about, again, my mate Justin Chancellor and I are dear friends, and I've become friends with, casually with some of the other guys. And And a couple of years ago, he just said, "Hey, mate, you want to come out with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And of course, no expectations.
Right.
And beginning of the end of 2016, early 2017, the same question came out, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, absolutely, I'd love to do it." And then it was greenlit.
I mean, and to be fair, we've talked before. You've toured with bands before. This is probably not as strange of an idea as it would be to some newer DJs. But I'm still curious, especially in the modern era. Did you change anything about your approach to play to a Tool crowd? How was the reception?
Yeah,
what was the vibe?
Well, yeah. So I knew that I was going to be doing some CDJ thing where, and I knew that with their production, whatever the rig I was going to be using, it had to be. It couldn't just be me with a screen in front of me with where I'm just like a floating torso of above vacant space of a stage that size. So I had a storage that we had a bunch of stuff in that needed to be moved, and I went in there and I had these. I was like, oh yeah, these 28-inch kick drum light boxes, basically. That years ago I wanted to try to get Ken into this idea of our doing a rig that was basically like an Alex Van Halen drum kit.
Oh, sure.
Like something like just massive, oversized, big kick drums, and just instead of toms, have the gear set up in there,
right.
And then have some crash cymbals. And so anyway, so we had this really cool set piece that was basically all this truss. So one tour we ended up taking that truss and cutting it all up and using it for something else, and then so that truss was in that shop as well. I started to put together, and I had there it is. That's the thing. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to set up. And I had these CDJs that we did a couple of years ago with my friend Stephen McSwain, who we did an art project for Pioneer, where we put a CDJ in a basically a two-headed neck bass guitar thing.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of this.
Yeah.
And for anybody listening, it looks insane, and you should Google Crystal Method CDJ guitar just to see this image, because it looks crazy.
It is. I remember when, because again, this is for an art project, and this is I remember when my friend, Stephen McSwain, he's like, man, I wanted to put a guitar strap on this thing. I'm like, can we? That's so cool, because again, finding a way to bridge the distance between a DJ who just is up there isolated looking down, again, it's with the CDJ thing, it's obviously a very difficult thing to do, but with Stephen's help and Pioneer's support, we did two of them, and we took them out on tour with us, and basically just have this giant umbilical cord that I wear out, and the bass
that
guitar
must have been heavy, man.
Oh yeah, it was. The bass guitar has there's a super hot pickup, and what I would do is I would the iPhone at the time, which was 4 or whatever it was, 5, I just come out of the bass, go right into the iPhone, into GarageBand, and just stack a bunch of gnarly plugins and this gate at the back end of it, and
That's interesting.
And then I would just go out there, and of course it was irregular length, so it had irregular sort of fretting. So I just found, and then I'd start to, I'd be 10 feet away from the mixer, and I could start the set.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I would take it and then I'd just walk out and then I would just mix on it. There's some really cool video of it in Brazil, and exactly how you would imagine it would be. This ridiculousness of this giant double-headed bass guitar with a CDJ mounted on it, and again, a fool like myself out there carrying it around. All of it came together. It looked cool because I was using there's a couple images out there. Of course, the one thing about Tool is that they don't let you take pictures at the show, and so they have a press, press can go in there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes for the opener and for Tool and take shots for the local papers and stuff. But so there aren't a lot of shots out there of it, and there are very few. I haven't seen any video of those performances, but they were. It was amazing. The production. I would just for the first 7 shows, it was just they set me up. I do a sound check. And then I'd hit my spot, and and I go out maybe to 1,500 people, then 2,000 people, and then by the time I was done, it'd be like 10,000 people in there. And again, it's always for me, just like going back to those days when we would play those radio shows about attitude and confidence, and
you must know how to play to a mixed crowd at this point, right?
Yeah, the thing I did was on those particular, I did take some other. I did versions of songs that were where I took some stuff out. I had a couple keyboards and I had a couple little, some of the Roland boutique stuff, and I did some of the synth lines or the strings or something like that. So I was playing stuff, but it was all still feeding into my my mixer, and the bulk of the heavy lifting was done by the CDJs. I am looking forward to, though, next year. Going out and doing a proper live show.
Yeah. And, that must have been sort of affirming that you could just go out with Tool. You could kind of build this show just from some ideas, get a good reception. That must feel good as far as the future of what you're talking about.
Definitely
now.
Felt better than getting knocked in the head by a plastic bottle. Not that would, mate, don't worry about it. They're going to be good. And their fans are. I've been to many. I'm a fan as well. I've been to their shows.
Oh, Tool is amazing.
They're just it's a special.
Yeah,
special show.
And I could hear about these tour stories forever. I have to ask just one more random story because it was integral to my adolescence, which was the Family Values tour back in the 90s.
Yeah, that was another one.
we talked about Korn and the new metal wave and all of that. And that tour, I didn't actually get to go see it the year that you were on it, but I saw it a different year. And I mean, to me, that was such a legendary tour of just, like you were talking about, nu metal was kind of this new hybrid genre. Yeah. And you guys, in your own way, were a hybrid genre at your time. And I thought it was so amazing then and now that there would be, because that bill was what? It was you and Korn.
But Korn was, they did maybe a couple shows. So we did like the first half of the tour, of that particular tour, the 99 Family Values tour, and the Limp Bizkit was the headliner, and then Filter was on that tour.
Oh yeah.
I think,
did you guys did they come out and do like Can't You Trip Like I Do?
No, we never did the song together. Except the only time we did do it together was when we did a show at the El Rey for the release of the previous Crystal Method album, where Richard Patrick came out with us, and but I always encouraged him. I said, "Dude, just go out there and throw that song. I mean, it's have fun with it."
Well, and that was a big song at the time.
Yeah, and I don't think he would. Yeah, he didn't. But Fred Durst did. He's like, "Man, we got to do something together." And I'm like, okay, so
did
it's
that
like,
ever come together?
Well, we did do. I can't remember what show it was. So we put together this couple minute, long track, and he's like, okay, cool. And so he came out, and I think he did. I think the lyric was "fuck Crystal Method." Fuck Crystal, like, so of course, yeah. So is it not not exactly the vibe that we were thinking about, but but it should be expected from. I
mean, I guess that is Fred Durst's brand.
Yeah, and throwing stuff at people.
Right. Well, on that whole tour, I mean, there were other weirdos on that
Method
tour
Man
too,
and
right?
Redman. I think were on some of those dates. Was it Bone Thugs and Harmony, or one of those? There's a Family Values 99 live CD. I think they did a CD.
Yeah, I think they did.
The other half of the tour, the band that replaced us on the second half of the tour was Primus.
Oh, Primus, yeah.
Primus. Crazy, fun times, again, doing, just going out there and just doing the show.
Would the artist, were you hanging out with these artists from the other, from the other camps, the other genres?
No, they did have on that tour, it was Sega Dreamcast was one of the sponsors, and so they would do a ticket giveaway or some sort of fan thing where you could, you would sit before the show and they had this little den of sorts, right in the middle of the, right in front of house. But that was and again, the rare opportunity when we had to talk to Fred Durst about cursing us, about telling us how much he loved having us. But not a lot of, it's one of those things where you're kind of just grinding it out.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Well, and yeah, I'm sure for you that was must have been in the middle of whirlwind touring in general.
The Australian tours on Big Day Out, those are the ones where you got to hang out with people because you usually, because of the way the schedule was, you're usually flying on same flights or similar flights, staying in similar hotels. They had a after party after every show, so that's where I actually hung out with Justin for the first time was when they were headlining the tour that we were on down there with the Killers. Were on that tour.
Oh, when Tool was
and down in Australia. So I do the other night in Sacramento I had a opportunity to hang out with Matt and Kim for a moment, and
they're great.
They're awesome.
I was just at a wedding with them over the summer. They're great. Yeah,
yeah, they're super fun. Yeah, they're very fun. And then funny enough, I ran into. I was getting on about to board a flight leaving Nashville on late Sunday night, early Sunday morning, and I was trying to grab a bite before I get on the plane, and somebody said, "Hey, man, I think I did shots with you before." And it turned around, it was Ulysses from Famoso Motley.
Oh, okay.
Band that we've done shows with over the years. And
wow.
So yeah, there's you do find every once in a while you run into somebody and that you've done shots with.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a danger we all face. And I mean, you've also been very collaborative in your music, right? You've worked with a lot of people from kind of all over the spectrum.
Yeah, that's how the Modest Yahoo collab came together. We were doing a festival together up in Vancouver, up at Whistler or whatever the ski resort up there, and he popped in and said, "Hey man, I'd love to come out and just sing over one of your tracks." And we played him High Roller, and he's like, "Yeah, this is the one." And I just, again, one of those moments where you hear one of those songs that you know very well, but you just hear another layer
right
on top of it.
Right. You hear the way somebody else is hearing it.
Yeah, it's like probably the time, I bet, like when somebody had strawberries and they're like, "Man, you put whipped cream on top of the strawberries. This is next level shit. We're going." There are great opportunities to meet people and out there. And again, part of the fun of going out on the road and seeing the world. You get to not only to play music to wonderful people, and the grind of it is what it is, but
and that's a way to keep it fresh too, right? Like I think about
don't I look fresh?
Yeah, you look fantastic.
Thank God this is on not on video.
But no, honestly, I think about the new album, The Trip Home, and the collaborations that you've done all throughout this. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like that must be a way to keep it exciting for yourself, and especially now that the Crystal Method is a solo act, in a way it's almost like you're able to kind of start over again and make it new and interesting to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And working with Ken again all those years, having success with not only your best friend, but friendship and collaboration, and those moments when you're grinding it out and succeeding and failing, and all those moments, come together, and then that person's no longer there. I mean, I definitely have found, a great deal of solace in having someone like a Glenn or even Tobias or even Dylan here that's in my room in the building here. I love the collaborative process. I love working with people, not only that obviously do these things that I do, like the Glenns and the Dylans, but I love, on this record I worked with Delilah Pez from the Last International, who I found through Morello's Instagram.
Okay.
I was thinking, God, I need because again, growing up in the era of the rock woman, the woman, the
front woman,
the Hearts, the Pat Benetars,
Yeah.
even the Cyndi Laupers, the Madonnas, these
Lita Ford, all
yes,
that,
Pretenders, these great women who went out there and rocked out, played great music, and made great music, and had a sound. That's the thing that's so hard to find. We briefly talked about a little while ago the production techniques, and how people are all kind of sounding the same because a lot of people are using the same things, and they're all going in. And how do you do this? And how do you do all that? But then you get this homogenous sort of sound of an artist that's catering to their sound to a producer's style, and
Sure.
and you hear you lose track of what the artist is about. Giorgio Moroder and Donna Summer made wonderful music together, but it was that was Donna Summer, and so again, I'm always trying to find not only someone that can sing, but someone that sounds authentic, and someone that has a voice that when they're saying or singing something, you believe it. Again, when blues and is all about hearing the story through the eyes of someone who's lived it.
And that's what makes it timeless, right?
Yeah.
Is that you could, just like you were talking about going into Dusty Grooves or anything, I mean, you can pull out a record from, damn near 100 years ago now and still feel connected to what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Even though it's not something we lived through. They were, life was different, culture was different, but there's something in that. I think you're totally right and I don't know what it is. I'm obviously not a singer, but when people are able to tap into that with just a voice, I think that's the most powerful thing in the world, man.
The whole Moby thing with Play, he's goes over to a friend's house. His friend's got this album, this field recordings. This captured these people that were in chain gangs and basically cotton fields. Just you went and found real. I mean, those samples came from someone who was living that, and it just sat and he did it. It was a brilliant, a brilliant album that captured all this, and he did a bunch of stuff on his own that sort of all brought it together.
Well, there's power in sampling. I grew up sampling. I love I don't know. I mean, I think
absolutely.
It's harder to sample now. I mean, I'm sure back in the day, you guys were sampling all kinds of amazing stuff, and we don't have to go down this road, but I think about even the Dark Crystal sample you guys did, and all of that. It's stuff people
that was just come because I used to work in a video store, and I was like, what is this? Because I was that wasn't my jam. That particular
that
movie. It was, it was a little. I can't remember what year it came out, but I was already wearing my big boy pants or something like that.
And that's the start of the original "Can't You Trip Like I Do."
The original
right?
Trip Like I Do, the Another World. Yeah, it was always about sending. Again, I grew up in the era of Star Wars and the cinematic sort of combination of music and score, excitement and all that.
Your music, I think, has always felt cinematic to me.
It's been this particular record was just an embrace of that concept of going in and I can't I'm not going to be one that deals with algorithms of streaming services where I kind of I thought what if I just do the opposite what if I just had the longest tail ever
that's
and I
always
just
your
and
instinct.
it's let it through the great collaborations and again I go into Sound City. The same guy, Tony Berg, who we talked about briefly earlier, who brought Ken out, is now one of the managing partners of Sound City. So it was all sort of very it's a nice little bringing it up all around back to the beginning. And
Right.
We had to split off a bunch of songs. The Trip Home is out now. The Trip Out is going to be coming next year.
That's the next album.
Yeah, it's a combination of just finding my my way through all the different things. Being a family guy, having kids, and having a wife, and having wanting to spend as much time with them, but still performing and playing shows for people and making people happy.
I mean, we're lucky to be able to do something that makes people happy, right?
Yeah, yes. But I've never been one to shy away from any opportunity to be a ham, and especially in those situations where I've got all this great music to play and been doing it for so long, whether it's in front of Tool fans or with Fred Durst, flipping me off from the crowd, or someplace like U Street in DC, or
shout out to U Street, man. I love that club.
Yeah, again, a lot of the old Buzz crew, Scott Henry's legendary club in the suburbs of DC that went super late, and
I only got to go there once, but I'll always remember that.
Yeah, it's coming out of the building at 4 a.m. and looking and seeing the glow of the Capitol just over the eyesight there,
Yeah.
eye line there. So it's unfortunately no longer there. Parking lot, I think, for the Nationals, but again,
But that's the way of everything,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've been talking this whole time about the cycles of music, the different trends that come and go. And I think just the fact that you're still here, not only still doing it, still making new awesome music, but still so clearly enjoying it and having fun with it. I think that's really inspiring, man. I'm really glad you're still here just doing it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad I'm still here as well.
Well, before we get out of here, is there anything we didn't cover that you want to get out there? Anything, you mentioned that you're working on the next album, another tour, all of that.
Yeah, I've got Matt Lang has done a exquisite reworking of "There's a Difference," which is going to be coming out soon. Very talented Odason, Otason, O-T-A-S-O-N.
Oh, I don't
One of
even
them
know
is
that
one of them is in New Zealand. The other one's in somewhere in Europe. There's a track called Lights that is an original track from them that I've been just banging at my shows, and so I asked them to do a remix of Ghost in the City. So that's going to be coming out. I've got shows around the country, and it's just having fun.
Awesome, Ben. Well, this has been really great. I hope when the next album drops, we can come back, do a part two. There's so many more things we could talk about.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt.
100%. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Peace. All right, that's the show. Shout out to Scott, the Crystal Method. It was an honor to talk to you, man. For everybody out there, make sure to go grab the new album, The Trip Home by the Crystal Method. And you can find the link in the description of this episode where you can go get all the music, all the discography, upcoming tour dates, everything. It's all going to be in that link. My name is Willy Joy. You can always hit me up, backtobackpod@gmail.com or @WillyJoy or @backtobackpod on all social media. And that's it for this week. I've been recording a lot of new episodes this week. Got some people I'm really excited about. Some good stuff coming up, so keep it locked. Until then, I hope you have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Be safe. And I will talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.